At 8:14 on a Monday morning, my mother called and whispered, "Claire, there are strangers carrying our furniture into a truck." Then the line went dead. I drove across town in 19 minutes. When I turned onto my parents' street, a white moving van blocked half the road. Two men were carrying my father's blue armchair down the front steps. A red and white sold sign stood in the yard. My brother Jason was beside it, speaking to a man in a construction helmet. He looked annoyed when he saw me. Not guilty. Not surprised. Annoyed. I parked across the driveway and stepped out. "Put that chair down." The mover stopped. Jason walked toward me. "Claire, don't create a scene. Why are strangers removing Mom and Dad's furniture?" "They're moving." "Where?" "A senior living community." My mother had lived in that house for 43 years. My father planted every tree in the backyard. Their names were still written in pencil inside the kitchen pantry beside the heights Jason and I had reached as children. And my brother was standing on the lawn as if he were clearing out a rental property. "Did they agree to move?" Jason lowered his voice. "They're no longer capable of making every decision. Our father had suffered a mild stroke 5 months earlier. His speech became slower and his right hand sometimes trembled. His mind had not disappeared. Our mother had arthritis and forgot where she placed her glasses. She was not incompetent. "Where are they?" I asked. "Inside." I walked past him. He caught my arm. "The sale has already closed." I looked down at his hand until he released me. "What sale?" "The house." "You sold their house?" "I handled the transaction under the power of attorney." "Without telling them?" "I told them we needed to restructure their assets." "That means selling the home they still live in?" Jason's jaw tightened. "You haven't been involved in their finances." "Because you made sure I wasn't." For the last 12 years, my parents had handed Jason almost everything. Control of our father's hardware company. Management of their investment accounts. Access to their medical records. Authority over their bills. When my father retired, he transferred 60% of the company shares to Jason. When my mother sold land she inherited from her aunt, she invested the proceeds in a fund Jason selected. They told me Jason needed more support because he had a family and business responsibilities. I was independent. Reliable. The daughter who would be fine. Being considered strong often means people feel comfortable giving your share to someone else. I entered the house. Cardboard boxes filled the hallway. Family photographs had been removed from the walls. Empty hooks remained where my mother's paintings used to hang. I found my parents in the downstairs guest room. My father sat on the edge of the bed wearing his brown cardigan. My mother was kneeling beside an open suitcase, folding the same nightgown again and again. When she saw me, her face collapsed. "Claire." I sat beside her. "Did you agree to sell the house?" She looked toward my father. He shook his head. "Fully. Curry." "No." My mother gripped my hand. "Jason said the insurance company required us to leave during renovations." "What renovations?" "He said there was foundation damage." My father forced the words out. "No damage." I looked around the room. "Did either of you sign a sales contract?" My mother hesitated. "Jason brought papers." "What kind of papers?" "He said they were for property taxes and medical care." My father pointed toward the desk. "Blue folder." The desk drawers were empty. Jason appeared in the doorway. "The folder is with my attorney." My mother looked at him. "Why is there a sold sign outside?" Jason's expression softened immediately. "Mom, we discussed this." "No, we didn't." "You were upset. You may not remember everything." I felt something cold move through me. He had begun using my father's stroke and my mother's age against them. Not only to control their money, to control their memory. My father struggled to stand. "I did not sell." Jason stepped toward him. "Dad, sit down before you fall." I said no. The words came out rough, but they were unmistakable. Jason looked at me. "You're agitating him." "I'm asking what happened to his house." "It was becoming too expensive." My mother stood. "We paid off the mortgage 15 years ago. Taxes, maintenance, utilities, it all adds up." "Where is the money from the sale?" I asked. "In a managed account." "Whose account?" "The family office." Our family did not have a family office. Jason had created an LLC called Bennett Family Management 2 years earlier. He told our parents it simplified bookkeeping. I pulled out my phone. What was the sale price? That's confidential. It's their house. Claire, you need to leave financial matters to people who understand them. I had spent 16 years managing restoration budgets worth tens of millions of dollars. Jason ran 3 hardware stores our father had built before he was 35. But in our family, Jason was always the businessman. I was the emotional daughter whenever I questioned him. One of the movers entered the room. Mr. Bennett, where should the bed frame go? Jason answered. Storage. My mother stared at him. I'm taking my bed with me. The new apartment is furnished. What apartment? He exhaled as though she were being difficult. Silver Pines. I knew Silver Pines. The cheapest unit was a single room with a small bathroom. My parents had been married for 48 years, and Jason planned to place them in one furnished room after selling a house worth more than $1 million. Stop the move, I said. Jason laughed. You have no authority. My father reached into his cardigan pocket and removed a small brass key. He placed it in my hand. Office. Jason's face changed. What key is that? My father closed my fingers around it. Red book. Jason stepped forward. You don't need to search through his things. My mother looked at him. Why not? Because Dad gets confused. My father stared directly at Jason. I know what you did. The room went silent. For 1 second, Jason looked frightened. Then he smiled. You're tired. I turned toward the mover. Nothing else leaves this house until the owners confirm where it is going. Jason pointed toward the door. This is private property. Yes, I said. They're private property. Not anymore. He removed a folded document from his jacket and handed it to me. The new owner was Oak Ridge Residential Development. The deed had been recorded 2 days earlier. The sale price was $640,000. My parents' house was worth at least $1.4 million. I looked at Jason. You sold it for less than half its value? The property needed major work. No, it didn't. The buyer accepted the risk. Who chose the buyer? I did. Who performed the appraisal? Our family management company. Your company. He said nothing. The signature page listed both my parents. My mother's signature looked shaky. My father's looked too smooth. I had watched him sign birthday cards since the stroke. His handwriting now leaned downward. The signature on the deed looked like it had been copied from years earlier. The notary was Mallory Bennett, Jason's wife. I looked up. Your wife notarized their signatures? She is commissioned. She is also financially connected to the person managing the sale. The title company approved everything. Did Mom and Dad appear before her? Jason looked toward our parents. My mother covered her mouth. My father whispered. No. I photographed every page. Then I called Naomi Reed. Naomi had handled my divorce 5 years earlier and later became my company's attorney. She had the calmest voice I had ever heard. That calm voice changed when I explained the deed. Do not let Jason take the original documents, she said. He says the closing is complete. Recorded deeds can still be challenged if they were obtained through fraud. What do I do now? Keep your parents inside the house. I'm filing for an emergency preservation order. The buyer may own it. The buyer cannot legally remove elderly occupants without a proper process. And if the buyer knew the sale was fraudulent, we have a larger problem. I ended the call. Jason was standing in the hallway. You called a lawyer. Yes. You're going to waste Mom and Dad's money. I'm trying to find it. He lowered his voice. You don't know what's happening with the company. What does the company have to do with the house? His silence answered me. You used the sale money for the hardware stores. It was a temporary transfer. How much debt are you hiding? His face hardened. You walked away from the family business. I was pushed out. Dad chose me. Dad gave you control. That isn't the same as permission to rob him. Jason stepped close enough that I could smell coffee on his breath. Be careful what you accuse me of. Be careful what you record at the county office. He glanced toward the deed in my hand. I saw the calculation behind his eyes. Then he walked outside and told the movers to stop. Not because he respected me. Because he suddenly understood that the documents might not protect him. 2 hours later, Naomi arrived with a temporary court notice preventing the removal of my parents or any remaining property until the transaction could be reviewed. The buyer's representative left immediately. Jason did not. He sat in the kitchen drinking coffee from my mother's favorite mug. "This injunction changes nothing," he said. "The money has already been transferred." Naomi placed her briefcase on the table. "To whom?" "Bennett Family Management." "Why not directly to your parents?" "I manage their assets." "Where are the funds now?" "In investment accounts." "Provide the statements." "I'm not required to answer you." My father pointed toward him. "Show her." Jason ignored him. Naomi looked at my parents. "Did you authorize the sale proceeds to be deposited into Jason's company?" My mother shook her head. "No." My father did the same. Jason stood. "You're leading two vulnerable people." Naomi's expression did not change. I asked a direct question. "They don't understand the structure." "I understand theft," my father said. Jason looked at him. Something passed between them that had existed before I arrived. Fear. Anger. Knowledge. My father pointed upstairs. "Red book." Jason left the kitchen. Fast. I remembered the brass key. I followed him. He was halfway up the stairs when I called his name. He stopped. "What is in Dad's office?" "Old business records." "Then why are you running?" He turned. "I am not running." "You were always terrible at losing." His face changed. When we were children, Jason would flip the board if he thought he might lose a game. My parents called him competitive. When I became angry, they called me difficult. He continued upstairs. Naomi stepped into the hallway behind me. "Jason," she said, "removing or destroying evidence after receiving a preservation notice would create additional legal exposure." He stopped again. This time he came down. "Take whatever you want." My father's office was at the end of the upstairs hall. The brass key opened the bottom drawer of an old oak filing cabinet. Inside was a red ledger. Every page was written in my father's careful handwriting. Dates. Amounts. Transfers. Loans Jason had taken from the company without approval. Payments made from my parents' investment accounts to cover store losses. Credit lines secured against company property. At the back of the ledger was a single page titled House. My father had written, "Jason asked me to pledge the house for an emergency company loan." I refused. The next entry was dated 3 weeks later. He returned with power of attorney papers. Evelyn believed they were healthcare forms. I told him I would not sign. Then, Mallory scanned my old signature from the original company agreement. My mother began crying when she read that line. Jason stood in the office doorway. "You wrote that when you were on medication." My father looked at him. "I wrote it before the stroke." The dates confirmed it. The final entry was 6 months earlier. "If Jason uses the power of attorney to sell the house, call Claire. She will ask questions even when we punish her for asking." I could not breathe for a moment. My parents had spent years choosing Jason, trusting Jason, defending Jason. But when my father believed the family might collapse, he wrote my name. Not because I was the favorite, because I was the person they expected to clean up what favoritism had allowed. I closed the ledger. "Why didn't you call me earlier?" My mother wiped her face. "Your father wanted to." "Then why didn't he?" He looked at Jason. "Because I said Jason would never do this." That hurt more than the house. She had been given warnings. She chose the son she wanted to believe over the daughter who would have believed her immediately. Naomi turned toward Jason. "The deed, notary acknowledgement and transfer of funds will be investigated." Jason folded his arms. "You still don't understand. The stores are about to fail." My father stared at him. "You said they were profitable." "They would have been if suppliers hadn't changed terms." "You lied." "I was protecting the company you built." "You sold my home." "To save your legacy." My father's voice grew stronger. "You are not my legacy." Jason went still. For the first time that day, I saw him understand what he had actually lost. Not the property. The story he had told himself. That he was the chosen son because he was the capable one. The protector. The heir. My father looked at me. "Claire, call Helen." Helen Ward had served as the company's outside accountant for 22 years. Jason interrupted. "She retired." "No," my father said. "You removed her." My father gave me a phone number from memory. Helen answered after 3 rings. When I told her about the red ledger, she said, "I've been waiting for Robert to find the courage to show you." What do you know? Enough to explain why Jason sold the house. The hardware company did not owe $200,000 as Jason had told our parents. It owed $1.8 million. He had opened 2 new stores without board approval. Used company money to finance a luxury home renovation business owned by Mallory. Paid himself bonuses during losing quarters. And pledged store inventory as security for private loans. The house sale was not intended to save the family business. It was meant to hide what he had already done. But Helen told me one more thing. The company shares my father gave Jason were held inside a family trust. Jason controlled the operations. He did not own the voting rights outright. A misconduct clause allowed the trust protector to suspend him if he misused family assets. Who is the trust protector? I asked. Helen paused. You are. I nearly dropped the phone. My parents had never told me. Neither had Jason. My father looked toward the window. I thought we would never need it. Jason's face lost its color. You made Claire trust protector? My father answered quietly. She was the only one who said no to me. That was the first time I understood why my father had placed my name in a document while excluding me from the company. He did not reward my judgment. He stored it for an emergency. Like a fire extinguisher no one thanked until the kitchen burned. Naomi closed the red ledger. We need bank statements, company records, the title file, and the buyer's ownership documents. Helen's voice came through the phone. I already have most of them. How? Robert asked me to keep copies outside Jason's office. Jason stared at my father. You planned this against me? My father looked exhausted. No. I planned for the day you stopped listening. The sale documents had already been filed. The money had already moved. My parents' furniture was still boxed. And the man they gave everything to was still legally running their company. But now we had the ledger. The trust clause. The forged signature evidence. And a question Jason had not expected anyone to ask. Who really owned the company that bought the house? Helen answered that question before midnight. Oak Ridge Residential Development was owned by several investors. But the small LLC that purchased my parents' property and immediately assigned it to Oak Ridge was called MJB Holdings. The initials belonged to Mallory Jane Bennett. Jason had sold the house to his wife's company for $640,000. MJB Holdings had agreed to resell it to Oak Ridge for $1.32 million. The second closing was scheduled for Friday. Jason and Mallory planned to keep nearly $700,000. The house was not collateral. It was profit. And Friday morning, Oak Ridge was hosting a public neighborhood meeting to announce the redevelopment. Jason planned to stand on my parents' lawn and describe their stolen home as a successful family transaction. Naomi looked at me. We can seek an emergency freeze privately. I thought of my father's blue chair sitting beneath plastic in the moving truck. My mother folding the same nightgown because she could not understand why she was leaving. The red ledger that carried my name only when disaster arrived. No, I said. We freeze the money. Then I looked toward Jason's house across town. And on Friday we let him explain the sale in front of everyone. For the next 3 days, Jason acted as though the dispute would disappear. He sent my parents flowers. He left voicemails saying everyone had become emotional. He emailed Naomi a proposal. My parents could live at Silver Pines for free for 5 years. The family trust would absorb the company debt. I would resign as trust protector. In return, Jason would forgive the disruption I had caused. Naomi read the email twice. He is offering your parents housing with their own stolen money. And asking me to disappear. He is used to that working. He was right. For most of my life, disappearing had been the role assigned to me. At 12, Jason received a new bicycle because he needed transportation to baseball practice. I received his old one because I was careful with things. At 17, my father paid Jason's private college tuition. I attended a state university with a scholarship. When Jason failed his first business project, my parents called it experience. When I opened my restoration firm, they called it risky. I built a career without their money. They used that independence as proof that I did not need fairness. Now they needed me to protect the house they had been willing to let Jason control. Part of me wanted to walk away. Not from the legal fight. From them. I wanted to recover the property, hand them the keys, and return to a life where I was not summoned only when their chosen son failed. My mother found me alone in the sewing room Wednesday evening. She sat beside me without speaking. The room contained unpacked boxes labeled Donate, Storage, and Silver Pines. After several minutes, she said, "I told your father not to make you trust Protector." I looked at her. "Why?" "I thought it would hurt Jason." "What about me?" She lowered her eyes. "I told myself you didn't want the company." "I didn't want the company." "Then I thought you wouldn't care." "About being trusted?" She flinched. I continued. "You gave Jason the business because he was the son. You gave him your money because he had children. You gave him authority because he stayed close enough to ask for it. And whenever I questioned him, you called me jealous." "I know." "Do you?" Her eyes filled. "I kept believing that if I gave him enough, he would finally become secure." "And did he?" "No. You didn't make him secure. You made consequences optional." She covered her face. I felt cruel. But honesty often sounds cruel after years of careful silence. My mother whispered, "I'm sorry." I had imagined hearing those words many times. In my imagination they healed something immediately. In reality they simply entered the room. Small. Late. Necessary. "I don't know what to do with that yet," I said. "You don't have to do anything." It was the first apology she had ever offered without asking me to comfort her afterward. She stood to leave. Then she touched one of the boxes. "Please don't save the house because you think you owe us." Why should I save it? Because what Jason did was wrong. That answer mattered. Not because the house belonged to my parents. Because wrong did not become acceptable simply because the victims had once been unfair to me. Thursday morning, Helen brought the company records. The numbers were worse than we expected. Jason had created fake vendor invoices. Mallory's renovation company billed the hardware stores for work that never occurred. He had also used my parents' investment account to guarantee a private loan. The lender believed my parents owned the house free and clear. Selling it broke the loan agreement. Jason needed the second sale to close before the lender discovered the property was gone. That explained the speed. The rushed move. The false story about repairs. He was racing against his own lies. Naomi filed 3 actions. A fraud notice against the deed. An emergency freeze on the MJB Holdings account. And formal suspension proceedings under the family trust. The judge scheduled a hearing for Friday afternoon. But the Oak Ridge neighborhood meeting was Friday morning. Jason did not know the bank had already flagged the second closing. He still believed he would receive the money by noon. At 9:30 Friday, my parents' front lawn filled with folding chairs. Neighbors arrived. Local reporters set up cameras. Oak Ridge displayed drawings of 12 luxury townhouses that would replace the house and most of the garden. A banner read, "Oak Ridge Gardens, a new chapter." My father stood at the upstairs window watching strangers discuss the destruction of his trees. "Do you want to stay inside?" I asked. "No." His voice was slow but firm. "This time I speak." My mother wore the navy coat she normally saved for church. My father wore his brown cardigan. I carried the red ledger. Naomi carried the court filings. Helen carried the trust records. We walked outside together. Jason stood near the stage in a gray suit. Mallory was beside him wearing a cream dress and holding a tablet. She smiled when she saw us. "You shouldn't bring Dad out in the cold." My father replied, "You should not sell my house." The reporter nearest us raised her microphone. Jason's expression tightened. He guided us toward the side of the house. "This is not the place." "You chose the place," I said. "Claire, Oak Ridge purchased the property legally. From your wife." The reporter moved closer. Mallory's smile disappeared. Jason looked toward the Oak Ridge executives. One of them began speaking urgently with an attorney. "You're making allegations you cannot prove," Jason said. Helen opened her folder. MJB Holdings was registered by Mallory 11 months ago. Mallory folded her arms. "It is a legitimate investment company. With no office, no employees and one transaction," Helen said. "Purchasing Robert and Evelyn's house below market value." Jason pointed toward my parents. "They signed the deed." My father raised his right hand. It trembled. "This hand cannot make that signature." The cameras moved toward him. Mallory said, I witnessed both signatures. My mother stared at her. You were not in our house that day. You came to our office. No. You may not remember. My mother stepped closer. I remember you calling me from Florida. Mallory went pale. We had obtained the travel records. She was attending a resort conference on the date she claimed to have notarized the signatures. Her notary stamp had been used while she was 3 states away. Naomi handed copies to Oak Ridge's attorney. The acknowledgement is false. The original buyer was related to the agent exercising the power of attorney, and the second buyer was not informed of that conflict. Oak Ridge's attorney read the first page. Then he turned toward Jason. Did you disclose your wife's ownership? Jason answered. The title company had all relevant information. That isn't what I asked. The neighborhood meeting had stopped. Every person on the lawn was watching. Jason looked at me. You planned this. No. You did. We brought the documents. Mallory reached for his arm. We should leave. My father stepped toward the stage. One of the Oak Ridge representatives tried to stop him, but the company attorney shook his head. My father took the microphone. His first words came slowly. My son told people I could not understand my own business. The lawn went silent. I understand that I gave him too much. Jason closed his eyes. My father continued. I gave him stores I built, accounts I saved, authority he did not earn. His voice broke, but he kept going. I thought giving one child more would make him responsible. Instead, it taught him that more would always come. My mother stood beside him. She took the microphone. We believed our daughter Claire would be fine without us. I looked down. We called her strong, my mother continued, when what we meant was that we expected her to accept less. No one moved. She turned toward me. That was wrong. I had not expected her to say it publicly. My chest tightened. Jason stepped forward. This meeting is about property development, not family therapy. My father looked at him. It is about my property. Naomi presented the preservation order. The second closing has been suspended. The proceeds from the first transfer are frozen. Oak Ridge cannot receive clean title while fraud claims remain unresolved. Oak Ridge's attorney addressed the crowd. Our company is withdrawing from the proposed transaction pending investigation. Murmurs moved through the lawn. Jason stared at him. You cannot withdraw. We have a signed assignment. We have a seller who may not own the property. We own it. Mallory whispered. Jason, stop. He turned on her. You said the title was clean. You handled the power of attorney. You notarized it. The microphone was still active. Every word carried across the lawn. Mallory looked at the crowd. Then at the cameras. You told me your parents had agreed. Jason's face changed. You knew they hadn't. I knew they wanted you to manage things. That isn't the same. No, I said. It isn't. The Oak Ridge attorney asked security to prevent any documents from being removed from the presentation tent. 2 investigators from the County Financial Crimes Unit arrived. They did not handcuff anyone on the lawn. They simply served document preservation orders on Jason, Mallory, and the title agent. Real consequences often begin quietly. A signature. A frozen account. A person realizing the confident explanation they prepared will now be repeated under oath. Jason looked at our father. I was trying to save the stores. Helen opened the red ledger. You transferred $380,000 from the company to Mallory's business. That was an investment. You paid yourself a $200,000 performance bonus during a year the company lost money. I worked 18-hour days. You borrowed against your parents' investments. I plan to repay it. My father answered. With my house. Jason looked around. The neighbors. The reporters. The Oak Ridge representatives. The employees from the hardware stores who had attended because they thought the development might create supply contracts. He had built his identity around appearing capable. Now the records were stripping that image away line by line. He turned toward me. You always wanted this. What? To prove you were smarter. No. I held up the red ledger. I wanted you to stop before Mom and Dad lost everything. You hate me. I hate what you did. That's the same thing. No. That difference is why I can stand here without enjoying this. Helen formally delivered the trust suspension notice. Effective immediately, Jason lost access to company accounts and decision-making authority. An independent manager would protect the stores while the finances were investigated. Jason laughed bitterly. And Claire takes over? No, I said. His laughter stopped. The trust appoints an outside restructuring team. You don't want the company? I never did. Then why are you doing this? Because you thought not wanting something meant I wouldn't protect it. My father returned the microphone to the Oak Ridge representative. The chairs were folded. The drawings were removed. The banner came down. By noon, the redevelopment meeting was over. The second sale never closed. At 4 that afternoon, the court continued the freeze and temporarily restored possession of the house to my parents while the deed challenge proceeded. When we returned home, the moving van was gone. My father's blue chair remained in the front hallway, wrapped in plastic. I cut the covering away. He sat down slowly. My mother stood beside him. For the first time that week, the house felt like theirs again. But nothing was finished. The deed was still recorded. The company was still in debt. Jason was still their son. And I was still the daughter they had remembered only when the person they chose had taken too much. Saving the house would be easier than deciding what happened to our family afterward. The deed was cancelled 7 months later. The title insurer agreed that the notarization was invalid and that the transaction involved undisclosed self-dealing. MJB Holdings returned the sale proceeds. Oak Ridge permanently withdrew. My parents' house legally became theirs again. But the legal victory did not restore everything. Jason's decisions forced the family trust to sell one hardware store. 2 others were placed under independent management. Most employees kept their jobs, although several senior managers left. Mallory's renovation company entered bankruptcy. She and Jason separated before the investigation ended. She claimed he had pressured her. He claimed she had designed the transaction. Their emails proved they had planned it together. Jason eventually accepted a settlement requiring restitution, permanent removal from company management, and surrender of most of his remaining trust interest. The forged notary documents and financial records remained part of a separate criminal case. My parents attended every hearing. At first, my mother cried whenever Jason entered the room. My father stared straight ahead. They were not only watching their son face consequences. They were watching the consequences of every excuse they had made for him. One evening, my mother asked, "Do you think we caused this?" We were sitting at the kitchen table. The pencil marks from our childhood were still visible inside the pantry. "You didn't force him to commit fraud," I said. "But we kept rescuing him." "Yes." She nodded. The truth hurt her. I did not soften it. "You taught him that failure would always be funded," I continued. "That other people's boundaries were obstacles. That I would forgive being excluded. That Dad would complain and then sign." My father looked down at his trembling hand. "I signed too many things." "You trusted your son." I ignored my daughter. I looked at him. He had never said it so clearly. "I gave you the trust protector role," he said. "You hid it from me. I thought it proved I respected you. It proved you expected me to carry responsibility without receiving any voice." His eyes filled. "I'm sorry." My parents' apologies did not erase the years. But they stopped asking me to pretend those years had not happened. That was the beginning of something more honest. They offered me Jason's remaining company shares. I refused. My mother looked confused. They should have been divided fairly from the beginning. "I don't want compensation in the form of a business I never wanted." "Then what can we give you?" "Respect that does not require a crisis." She absorbed that quietly. The trust sold Jason's remaining shares to an employee ownership group. The workers who had kept the stores operating during the investigation gained a stake in the company. My father resisted at first. Then Helen showed him the numbers. The stores became more stable when decisions were shared by people who actually worked inside them. The Bennett name remained on the signs. But no Bennett controlled the company alone. The house needed changes. My father struggled with the stairs. My mother's knees worsened. They could have stayed because the property had been recovered, but maintaining it no longer made sense. This time they chose what happened next. No false emergency. No secret documents. No son making decisions for them. They listed the house openly with an independent agent. The final sale price was $1.46 million. almost twice what Jason had accepted. My parents purchased a smaller accessible home near a park. 2 bedrooms. A wide front porch. A kitchen my mother chose herself. My father insisted on moving his blue chair. On moving day he stood in the old living room for a long time. I thought leaving would feel like losing, he said. Does it? No. He looked around. Being forced out was losing. Choosing is different. I understood. For years I had believed distance from my parents meant I had failed to belong. Eventually I realized distance could also be a choice. A boundary. A way of refusing to remain in the role assigned to me. I helped them move, but I did not become their full-time manager. They hired a professional financial advisor. Medical decisions were documented with both parents present. Naomi reviewed every major legal document. I remained an emergency contact, not an unpaid replacement for the son they had trusted. That distinction saved our relationship. Jason wrote to me from the temporary apartment he rented after separating from Mallory. His first letter blamed the economy. His second blamed our father for giving him a struggling company. His third blamed Mallory. I did not answer. The fourth letter contained one sentence that sounded honest. I believed that because Mom and Dad always gave me more, anything they owned would eventually become mine. I kept that letter. Not as forgiveness. As evidence of the lesson he had finally understood. Months later he requested a meeting. We met at a quiet diner near the original hardware store. He looked older. His expensive watch was gone. He stirred coffee without drinking it. Did Dad send you? I asked. No. Mom? No. Then why are we here? He looked through the window. I wanted to ask whether you think they'll ever forgive me. I don't know. You always know what they're thinking. No. I was simply expected to understand everyone without anyone understanding me. He lowered his eyes. I was awful to you. Yes. You don't have to agree that quickly. You asked for honesty. He almost smiled. Then the expression disappeared. I thought you had everything. I stared at him. You inherited the company. You had freedom. I built freedom because no one planned to catch me if I failed. They were proud of you. They rarely said it. They talked about you when you weren't there. That isn't the same as showing up. He nodded slowly. I know that now. He told me about the night before the sale. Our father had called him. Not to accuse him. To ask whether the house was safe. Jason said yes. The next morning he signed the assignment to Oak Ridge. Why? I asked. I needed the money. You had other choices. Every other choice involved admitting I'd failed. And selling their home didn't? I thought I could replace it later. That was how Jason saw people and property. Interchangeable. Temporary. Reparable after he got what he needed. You cannot replace consent later, I said. I know. We did not hug when we left. He was still responsible for what he had done. Understanding did not erase consequences. But for the first time we spoke as two adults instead of the chosen son and the overlooked daughter. A year after the sold sign appeared, my parents invited me to dinner at their new house. My father's blue chair stood beside the porch window. My mother had framed a photograph of the old house and placed it in the hallway. Not as a monument to what Jason almost took. As a record of the life they had chosen to leave on their own terms. After dinner my father gave me the red ledger. I don't want it, I said. Neither do I. Then why give it to me? Because I wrote your name in it when I was frightened. He placed it on the table. I should have spoken your name when I was proud. I looked at him. He continued. Your mother and I gave Jason assets because he kept asking. We gave you responsibility because you kept proving you could carry it. That wasn't fair. No. He touched the cover of the ledger. This is not an inheritance. It is an apology. I took it home. For several weeks, it remained inside a drawer. Then I removed the final page, the one with my name, and framed it beside a photograph of myself at 27, standing in front of the first building my company restored. Not because the ledger proved my father eventually trusted me. Because it reminded me that being needed is not the same as being valued. And I would never confuse those things again. My parents gave everything to my brother because they believed love could make him responsible. Instead, unlimited rescue taught him that everything had a price, and someone else would always pay it. The business paid. Their savings paid. Our relationship paid. and eventually the house nearly paid too. Jason believed selling the property was only another financial decision. He did not understand that a home contains more than market value. It contains permission, memory, choice, the right to decide when you leave. He sold that right behind their backs. I helped them reclaim it. But the most important thing we recovered was not the deed. It was the truth our family had avoided for years. Favoritism does not only hurt the child who receives less. It can also destroy the child who is never required to hear no. My brother inherited opportunities without accountability. I inherited strength without support. Neither gift was as generous as our parents believed. In the end, the house was sold. But not by Jason. Not through forged signatures. Not for half its value. My parents sold it themselves, chose their next home, protected their future, and finally stopped asking one child to take everything while expecting the other to repair the damage. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. What would you have done if your brother sold your parents' house behind their backs? Would you confront him immediately, or stay calm until you uncovered where the money really went? Subscribe to Her Final Move for more fictional stories about family betrayal, hidden financial schemes, intelligent revenge, and women who refuse to be remembered only when everything falls apart.